morning, Glory America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Joined now by United States Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back.
Hey, Hugh. Good morning. It's good to be back on with you.
I want to talk about NATO and China this morning. Jumping off from two headlines, the Washington Post, NATO expands focus on China, a win for Biden in his first trip to the battered alliance. Monday's discussion was a sharp expansion of NATO's efforts to confront Beijing after years when China was outside the focus of the defensive alliance. New York Times, shifting focus, NATO views China as a global security challenge, again parroting the Biden administration talking points that China's rising military ambitions are presenting NATO with challenges that must be addressed. The description of China contained in the communique issued at the conclusion of a one-day summit meeting attended by President Biden reflected a new concern over how China intends to wield its rapidly growing military might and offensive cyber technologies. Are you of the opinion that NATO has never dealt with China before?
No, Hugh, that's not the case, although it's been fitfully, and with some of their members, especially Germany, kicking and screaming. I mean, it's good to see NATO focused on the genuine threat to the free world in the decades ahead, which is communist China. Of course, Russia remains a threat, but China is the threat to the free and civilized world. I wish they would be able to call it that as opposed to, I think they called Russia a threat and China a challenge. And that's in part because people like Angela Merkel want to keep selling Volkswagens and Beamers into China and to sell all their industrial manufactured products into China. So there's still a lot of divisions in Europe, and you saw that at the G7 as well.
So I also cannot believe that NATO's been deployed in Afghanistan all these years without keeping eyes on China and its exploitation of the mineral resources or the border or the Belt and Road Initiative.
Sure, there's been some, interactions and encounters like that. All of these German leaders, of course, know what a threat China poses to the United States and really to the entire free world. But so many of them and their industrialists are just so deeply in hock to the Chinese Communist Party and access to its market and its low-cost goods. They've sent production over there for so long that they just don't want to take the stand that they should on things like Chinese investment to Europe, Chinese ownership of critical ports and shipyards and so forth, Chinese investments in European telecom systems, et cetera, et cetera.
I just asked Admiral Stavridis, I'll ask Secretary Pompeo, who's up at the bottom of the hour, should NATO become PATO, in other words, from the North Atlantic to the Pacific Atlantic Treaty Alliance, bringing in the democracy of Japan, Australia, and India into the alliance that deals with authoritarian regimes like Russia and China?
Hugh, NATO has always been centered in the North Atlantic, and its primary military threat has always been Russia, and that remains the case. We want our NATO partners to do more on things like Chinese investment into Europe or China trying to corner international markets. But I think we have to be clear-eyed that our European partners, minus Great Britain, simply don't have the military capability to defend themselves against both Russia and to help us in the Western Pacific against China. Some of them can't even defend themselves against Russia. Nor do their peoples necessarily have the desire to stand up for each other. But in the Western Pacific, Great Britain can help us, as they are this year, sending one of their carriers across the globe. But the military balance of power in the Western Pacific will depend primarily on the United States and South Korea and Japan and Taiwan and Vietnam, the Philippines and India, not NATO countries.
Now, as one of the acknowledged rising leaders of the Republican Party, I want to play for you a clip of President Biden at NATO yesterday. I don't know why this came up. I don't know the question that preceded it, but it struck me as unusual for a NATO summit to be saying this by the President of the United States. Cut number 17.
The Republican Party is vastly diminished in numbers. The leadership of the Republican Party is fractured, and the Trump wing of the party is the bulk of the party, but it makes up a significant minority of the American people. And we'll see. We'll see.
What do you make of that, Senator Cotton?
I think Joe Biden is trying to find excuses for his own failures in these first 4 months in office. If he wants to see divisions in a party, I suggest that he looks at the congressional wing of his party, where progressives are saying that Joe Manchin is defending Jim Crow, or what may be worse in their eyes, saying that Joe Manchin is worse than Mitch McConnell, Hugh.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to talk numbers, Hugh, the Democrats have FDR and LBJ-sized ambition. Unfortunately for them, they don't have FDR, LBJ-sized majorities. The House majority is the smallest it's been in almost a century. And in the Senate, they don't even have a majority. It's evenly divided. Chuck Schumer is the Senate floor leader. He is not the majority leader because he only controls the Senate by virtue of Kamala Harris being available to come down to the Capitol and break a tie on close votes. So Joe Biden came into office with negative coattails, something far different from Donald Trump or Barack Obama or George Bush or Bill Clinton. And you're seeing that in the Congress right now. And I think that clip you just played from Joe Biden reflects his recognition that he simply doesn't have the votes to pass his far left agenda. I mean, I don't know why he's bringing it up overseas when he should be representing the United States and making foreign policy. But I think that's beginning to dawn on both him and all the Democrats in Washington.
Your fellow Army veteran, Michael Waltz, I always note my son works for him. Michael Waltz and Jim Banks and another congresswoman put out a resolution of censure yesterday of Ilhan Omar for her comments. And then Michael Waltz called the squad the Hamas caucus. Nancy Pelosi did the predictable reflexes thing and said that was dangerous. What do you make of the censure motion? Would you vote for it if you were still in the House? And what do you make of the Hamas caucus description?
I would vote for it. I think they should probably go farther and remove Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. Anyone who compares the United States and Israel to Hamas and Taliban should not be deeply invested in making U.S. foreign policy. And if Ilhan Omar and her squad doesn't want to be attacked for making anti-American, anti-Israeli comments, here would be my suggestion. Don't make anti-American and anti-Israeli comments, and then you won't be attacked for it.
Yeah, I think if you are going to make the moral equivalence argument of the United States and Israel is the same as Hamas and Taliban, the Hamas caucus fits until you issue an unequivocal condemnation of a terrorist organization that fires thousands of rockets at civilians. The Taliban murders innocent civilians. I know why Pelosi's defensive. It's because the truth hurts, Senator Cotton.
Well, Pelosi's defense gets back to what we were talking about earlier, Hugh. Not only does the truth hurt, but she can't afford to lose her far-left squad. Remember, she can only lose 4 votes. I think the so-called squad has a self-avowed 7 members, and they have a lot more far-left Democrats in the House as well. Hugh, they almost took down a spending bill last month that Pelosi was pushing for heightened Capitol security. Do you know why they took it down? Almost took it down?
No.
Because it gave more money to the Capitol Police. And the Democrats aren't in the business of funding the police. They're in the business of defunding the police. And it was only after an hour-long vote with arms twisted and promises made that Nancy Pelosi finally got 2 or 3 of those fringe Democrats to vote present instead of no, therefore reducing the number of yes votes she needed to pass that bill. That's why Nancy Pelosi is equivocal whenever Ilhan Omar compares America to Hamas, because she can't afford to lose her vote.
Now, let me talk about Leader McConnell. He came on yesterday and said the political equivalent of the sun rises in the east, meaning that if the party is different in the Senate than it is in the presidency, an election year nomination of a Supreme Court justice isn't going anywhere. Heads exploded across the spectrum. I mean, I've got clip after clip after clip. Why do we get this? I think it's faux outrage, Senator Cotton. Of course it's not going to happen. We have the Scalia precedent. We have precedent going back to the 1800s on this issue.
Yeah, Hugh, I think this is just one more instance of the left's contempt for our Constitution that goes back as far as the 19th century, starting with Woodrow Wilson. I think it was outmoded and outdated. You know, the left frequently uses the term gridlock, which is the left-wing term for the separation of powers, checks, and balances. And that's exactly what Senator McConnell is talking about. If the American people elect Republicans to the House and to the Senate next year to put a brake on the Biden agenda, then that's exactly what they expect the Republicans in Congress to do, and that is what we will do.
You know, my colleague at NBC, Joy Reid, called Mitch the wickedness in high places and evil yesterday. Now, the leader is a very good leader and a superb Republican and probably the most effective legislative leader in my lifetime. I mean, the left is kind of unhinged here, Senator.
Well, that's why I said, Hugh, that when you've got fellow Democrats comparing Joe Manchin to Mitch McConnell, those are genuine fighting words in the Democratic Party. There's not much more they can insult them by saying that, and it just goes to show what an effective war leader Mitch McConnell has been.
You should drop by and see if Senator Manchin wants to join a majority. Senator Cotton, thank you. Always a pleasure. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back from Inside the Beltway. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.